Burkina Faso has a long history of youth activism and revolutionary fervor. Every year on October 15th, tens of thousands of Burkinabe, many of them young people who never even lived under his rule, gather at Thomas Sankara's tomb in Ouagadougou to honor their martyred hero and protest the status quo. Sankara, 1983-87, was a charismatic leader who preached Pan-African solidarity, land reform, and self-reliance, and his radical vision still inspires a new generation across Africa. In 2014, the next wave of young Burkinabe made history by forcing longtime dictator Blaise Compaoré out of office. Hundreds of thousands of protesters, predominantly youth and students, poured into the streets of Ouagadougou when Compaoré tried to extend his 27-year rule. That uprising was led and fueled by youth anger at corruption, unemployment, and neo-colonial influence, a theme that echoes today. In short, Burkina's youth have repeatedly shown they will mobilize fiercely for national dignity and change. Many young Burkinabe now see themselves as heirs to Sankara's revolution, determined to finish the work of ending foreign control and building an independent future. Ibrahim Traoré is a Burkinabe army officer in his mid-30s who unexpectedly became the country's transitional leader in late 2022. Born in March 1988 in Bondoukoui, Traoré attended the University of Ouagadougou before entering the army in 2009. He trained in anti-aircraft artillery, joined United Nations peacekeeping missions in Mali, and fought insurgents in northern Burkina. By 2021, he had risen to the rank of captain. After the January 2022 coup that ousted President Kabore, a new junta led by Lieutenant Col Damiba struggled to contain jihadist violence. On September 30th, 2022, Captain Traoré and a small group of loyal soldiers carried out a second coup against Damiba. Within weeks, Traoré was sworn in as transitional president and head of state. At about 34 years old, he became one of the world's youngest leaders. Traoré has a reputation as a hard-working soldier who lives modestly. He has kept his pay at the low captain's rank, and he has spoken little about personal details. Observers note that he is staunchly anti-jihadist, pro-military, and increasingly vocal about national sovereignty. Importantly, he represents a new generation of African leadership, a young, dynamic officer who rose through the ranks fighting insurgents and now claims to embody Burkina's revolutionary spirit. When Captain Traoré took power, he promised a dramatic break from the failures of the past. In his first public statement, he declared a state of emergency across Burkina Faso and vowed to combat the Islamist insurgency in full force. Crucially, he also promised a return to civilian rule according to a transition timetable, initially pledging elections by July 2024. These words immediately struck a chord with many young people tired of insecurity and stagnation. Traoré's message of security and prosperity has proved deeply appealing to a youth generation that saw previous governments bow to foreign dictates while terror marched unchecked. In the months since 2022, he has projected an image of himself as a humble servant of the people, sometimes even living in a modest military barrack instead of the presidential palace. Wherever he appears, supporters greet him like a liberator. In fact, when he attended Ghana's independence celebrations in January 2025, he received thunderous applause as Africa's youngest head of state. Many saw in Traoré echoes of Thomas Sankara, a continental visionary fighting for dignity. As one analyst put it, to the younger generation, Traoré's regime is an opportunity to show the older generation what young people can do if given the chance. Indeed, some youth jokingly call him Junior Sankara, or credit him with recapturing the promise of the 1983 revolution. By framing his ascent as the awakening of Africa's pride, Traoré tapped into deep Pan-African emotions. Young Burkinabe heard his vision as more than politics, as a mission to reclaim their country's destiny and inspire hope for Africa, hope for black people, hope for all freedom fighters around the globe, as one marcher exclaimed. Traoré's policies on the economy have been bold and unorthodox, drawing strong interest from young Burkinabe who see long-awaited change. Early in his tenure, he rescinded a planned pay raise for government ministers that had been arranged by the previous regime. Traoré himself refused any salary increase, continuing to earn a captain's modest wage even as others protested his coup. More dramatically, he embarked on a program of resource nationalism that struck at the heart of foreign corporate interests. Through a new state mining company, Sopamib, the government has taken over major gold mines, notably the Bungu and Wagnion mines previously run by international firms. Under a campaign called A Revolution in Mineral Wealth Management, he then inaugurated a national gold refinery to process ore within Burkina Faso rather than exporting raw metal. Cotton growers too have seen new support. The regime launched a national support center for artisanal cotton processing and boosted subsidies for small farmers. Even infrastructure projects feel homegrown. Burkina has built or upgraded roads and its first major airport in Donsin. projects meant to accelerate trade and integration of rural zones. These reforms carry huge symbolic weight for youth. Many young Burkinabe suffer from unemployment and see foreign companies as having long siphoned off their country's wealth. So when Traoré nationalizes mines and invests in schools and clinics, it looks like a long overdue reversal of injustice. He also made headlines by turning down an offer of new IMF or World Bank loans. In interviews, he said Burkina could develop on its own terms without debt shackles, a message that resonates with young Africans tired of conditional aid. As Traoré proudly proclaimed, "We will break any bonds that maintain us in slavery." Youth on the streets have taken this to heart. They see his economic agenda as giving them a stake in the nation. Instead of poverty and foreign aid, they talk about prosperity generated at home. In fact, one supporter told reporters that reversing resource deals and investing in farmers has given me hope that Burkina's assets will benefit ordinary Burkinabe. In short, Traoré's economic vision, grounded in local control and social investment, appeals to young people who want tangible improvements in jobs, services, and national wealth. A defining element of Traoré's rise has been the surge of anti-imperialist sentiment among his supporters. Many Burkinabe youth have absorbed decades of skepticism toward former colonial powers, and Traoré has skillfully tapped into that mood. Under his rule, Burkina has expelled French troops, quietly closed French military bases, and dramatically recalibrated its foreign ties. The new government halted some French development projects and even publicly told France to leave the country's security affairs. Meanwhile, relations with Moscow have warmed, a reversal of Burkina's traditional alignment. In all these moves, youth pride is explicit. They regard the CFA franc, a colonial-era currency tied to France, as bonds of slavery. Traoré has spoken of ending that currency in favor of an independent African currency, echoing Ghana's late president Nkrumah. Popular media and street murals now tout slogans like "Fin de l'impérialisme" and "Nous ne serons plus esclaves," referring to ending neo-colonial control. One musician at a recent rally told journalists, "We will no longer tolerate looting of our gold. The general is a liar. We own it and use it whenever we want, and sell it to whomever we want." In practice, this has translated into aggressive reforms. Burkina has started paying in its own emerging currency for some imports, and he has publicly warned foreign investors that exploitative deals will be renegotiated or cancelled. The colonial past looms large in public discourse. Many young people still remember or were told how Sankara sought to cut foreign debt and elites' privileges back in the 1980s, and Traoré is often cast as continuing that anti-imperial legacy. Even the recent incident in the U.S. Senate, where a U.S. general accused Traoré of looting state resources, only intensified the anti-Western narrative. Protest posters in Ouaga after that speech showed the general's face labeled esclave, slave. To the youth in those crowds, that was affirmation that Traoré is resisting neo-colonial pressures. As one marcher put it, everything the young president is doing is part of a souverainiste and pan-Africanist vision, a sovereign pan-African vision of development. In sum, anti-imperialist sentiment is not just rhetoric in Burkina today, but a driving force in youth support for Traoré. He is seen as a leader who actively breaks from the colonial legacy and dares Western powers to maintain us in slavery, a phrase he himself used in a video statement. Technology and Pan-African networks have multiplied the momentum behind Traoré, especially among connected youth. Even before street rallies took off, young activists organized social media protests to show support. On April 30th, 2025, dubbed International Day of Traoré, hashtags like "We Stand with Ibrahim Traoré" trended across Francophone Africa as people from Burkina to Senegal posted solidarity photos and slogans. This online activism coincided with massive street demonstrations. In Burkina cities like Ouagadougou, Bobo-Dioulasso, and even smaller towns like Koudougou, youths gathered en masse with flags and placards. In Koudougou, hundreds of students and young workers spontaneously flooded the main square chanting patriotic songs to soutenir le président Traoré. They said they came out not because organizers demanded it, but because each young Burkinabe felt a civic duty to back a government that talks about development and stability. One participant explained that the outpouring was a marée humaine, human tide, reflecting the local youth's full support for Traoré's vision. Another young marcher declared, "Cette marche témoigne des aspirations de la jeunesse à voir se poursuivre les efforts pour le développement et la stabilité." This march demonstrates youth aspirations to continue effort toward development and stability. The Pan-African dimension is also striking. Youth movements in neighboring Sahel states, many of which have also experienced coups and anti-French politics, have openly cheered on Traoré. Radical youth organizations in Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal held their own rallies and vigils under slogans like Hands Off AES, AES referring to the New Alliance of Sahel States. In Accra on April 30th, young protesters with the Socialist Movement of Ghana waved Burkina's red-green flag alongside Ghana's and condemned foreign meddling in West Africa. They proclaimed that, under Captain Traoré, Burkina Faso has become a symbol of African dignity and resistance.